Shalom, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakal Kadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who have taught me this truth, and a shout out to Yakim that's out there on the four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Going into the cities and proclaiming this truth to our people, the blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and confusion and face that be among us, as we know that as they continue their wars over there, the war continues over here. Just out of nowhere, there were fire tornadoes and had destroyed, had pretty much leveled the national park. Whiskey Town is completely obliterated, as well as Keswick and other places here in writing where I prophesy at. And I said, you know, we have said that eventually America is going to look like Aleppo, and we're starting to see some of that come back. But here's some of the other shit that America does not hesitate to do as they fund terrorists and destroy lives. And this is footage from Yemen, because Yemen is just right there in Saudi Arabia, which is the Valley of Yehoshaphat, that the Most High is gathering the North Country. But this is some of the lives that America has destroyed. Do I even need to make mention of what they've done to our people? And still continue to do so? So while we got that, of course we know that Donald Trump is, of course they're fucking with Korea, as they always do, so this is a short little clip I have here.
And
or actually
that has
Gomer.
to do with the personal relationship, so President, thank you very much.
A warm handshake between US President Donald Trump and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan after a meeting last year. The two appeared to have a good working relationship, but from the Turkish perspective, there's also been disappointment. Turkey feels that the US has not delivered on its promises, particularly over Syria. The main point of contention is Washington's arming of the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. The US believes the group is crucial in the fight against Daesh in northern Syria, but it's primarily made up of the YPG, the Syrian affiliate of the PKK, a group that has attacked Turkey and is considered a terrorist organization by both Turkey and the United States. Ankara says Washington had promised to no longer arm the YPG, but still continues to do so. The Syrian city of Manbij has also been a major sticking point. It's located across what Turkey considers a red line for the advance of SDF forces, but the US allowed the SDF to capture Manbij from Daesh in 2016. The SDF remains there, despite US promises it would withdraw, and Turkish-backed forces are now ready to move on the city.
12.000 kilometreden kalkıp buraya niye geliyorsun?
The US said it will not leave Manbij. You don't have a right to be there, actually. Why are you coming from 11 to 12,000 kilometers away? What do you have to do with these lands? They came and brought the YPG and PYD. 90% of this region was Arab, but they drove them out. They said Daesh is no longer active here and nothing of them is left. So what are you here for? Then they said, let's take one half and you take the other. No, neither of us will be there. The people who own these lands will get them.
The other main issue worsening relations between Turkey and the US is Turkey's extradition request for Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania. He's the man Turkey believes is behind an attempted coup that killed 250 people in 2016. Ankara says it has proved its case to the US.
The files we sent are evidence enough for him to be provisionally arrested in the US and extradited to Turkey. We never asked them to ignore the judicial process and hand him over right away. What we say is that we believe that at the end of the judicial process, the decision will be in accordance with Turkey's expectations.
2 years on, and Gulen doesn't look any closer to facing trial in Turkey. And that will remain a sticking point in any attempt to improve relations between Ankara and Washington. أبو بكر الجماحي TRT World.
So Gomer's getting sick of Esau shit as well, you know. Of course, while we have all these other things going on, here's some updates from Dara. I can only show a little bit as they love taking down videos that shows too much war coverage, but I'll just give you a glimpse of it. Bashar al-Assad is driving out the terrorists and driving them back into the Golan Heights in Jordan, retaking Damascus from the U.S.-backed terrorists.
Артиллеристы 4-й дивизии бьют из реактивной системы залпового огня «Голаны». Эту систему РСЗО производят прямо в танковой дивизии, которая здесь считается элитной. Соединением командует брат президента страны. Ракеты уничтожают бетонные укрепления террористов ИГИЛ у границ с Иорданией и Израилем. Это последняя зона активных боевых действий в провинции Дера. Боевики прижались к границам с сопредельными странами. В наступлении участвуют бойцы бригады генерала Сухела, 4-й танковой дивизии, гвардейцы и бывшие боевики так называемой свободной сирийской армии. У тех отрядов, которые никогда не ориентировались на радикальную идеологию террористов. Ранее такое и представить было сложно. Рядом вместе офицер подразделения правительственных сил и бывший боевик, командир штурмовой группы.
Надо было давно нам вместе воевать против такого зла, как ИГИЛ, чтобы у нас в стране наступил мир и жители нашей страны смогли жить дома.
По сути, все боевики ИГИЛ смертники. У всех есть пояса со взрывчаткой. Используют и начиненные автомобили. Сложно наступать.
Такое стало возможно благодаря российским военным. Офицеры Центра по примирению враждующих сторон убедили боевиков перейти на сторону официального Дамаска. Теперь они на передовой зарабатывают себе право вернуться к мирной жизни. Бок о бок воюют с танкистами 4-й дивизии. Причем воюют, что называется, на совесть. Освободили уже ряд населенных пунктов. Вот там находится пас...
Anyway, they are driving these terrorists back to where they came from, which of course they continue to get funding from the whole America. And this is another guy that Brother Malcolm had introduced me to. And so this is the last American vagabond who does, I think he does better than even Chris Green. He actually has a lot of truth in his videos.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. So I wanted to begin today with something I had all pre-prepared. I had something in my mind, this whole concept about something that's seemingly grabbing everyone's attention right now. And at the last moment, I just decided that I didn't want to go with that, because of some things I'll get to in a second, but more so because I felt like I was in a large way just perpetuating the same problem that I felt like I was trying to address. So I want to begin first with something that I just recently wrote that seems to kind of hit on the nose what, at least to some degree, what I'm trying to get at today, and then we can get into some of the stories for today. So far too much today is seemingly decided for us by those dictating what represents the political stance of either side of the two-party divide. It has become the entire identity of far too many to now associate themselves in every way with the representation of their chosen side in this fight, to utterly immerse themselves in whatever they feel is the official party line. All too often, this immersion is done without the slightest due diligence or critical analysis of the facts at hand, as they already believe themselves to be on the right side, the moral side, the side of the just. Yet this is a very naive view of the world, to think that one side of any ongoing battle, false or otherwise, that is made up of many different people with their own individual desires and motivations, is somehow entirely altruistic, beyond reproach,
aka Edomites,
simply because they are on a given side. Not only is this wildly oversimplified, but it's also historically inaccurate, without fail. There are always those with their own designs, those with a desire to mislead or abuse the trust and belief of those around them for their own nefarious or self-serving agendas.
which is
Now, some may
Esau.
say that's a pessimistic view, and it may well be, but it's also the reality we live in, backed up by centuries of documentable fact. This is not to say we should not trust anyone, or never believe in anything, quite the contrary.
You just don't believe.
We should, however, always question the motives and actions of those in power. It comes with the job description. It's also our job as the people to hold them accountable in every way and never simply trust that they have our best interests in mind. Just as we can see today, if one is able to pull away from the two-party delusion, that is, every action taken from either side progresses the interest of a select group. And it sure isn't the American people. It's this very illusion of left versus right that allows them to keep us at each other's throats instead of standing back and recognizing that we have been fooled.
And America is a fallen nation.
That they have slowly backed us into a cage, into a corner.
That's all a part of
telling us it's a wide open pasture.
Collapse.
I believe many, in fact, are beginning to see this deception for what it is. But until we can get through to the masses who refuse to accept that they have been manipulated, some for their entire lives, they will continue to have enough control to maintain the facade. That's why it's so important for each of us to continue to illuminate the corner we have been forced into.
And that facade
and expose the bars of the cage at every turn, with every opportunity. It's our duty to guide those lost to the other side and help them remain free of the next deception that is no doubt already in the works. We must never give up or lose hope. The simple fact that we are facing so much resistance in general, that our videos are being censored, our accounts being deleted, shows us that we are indeed making progress. And they fear our efforts more than we know. Now, I very recently wrote that. And ultimately, this comes back to a few points for me when we're talking about the new deception trapping people once again. Or the idea of how people, not just in power or in politics, but in certain positions, will use the faith and belief of everyone around them to progress what they want to accomplish. Even if that may be altruistic in their mind, even if they believe in what they're trying to accomplish. Now, I'm not trying to make too fine a point here, I just want that to resonate in general, that concept, and I really want to make the overarching point that even objectively covering a story that could be a psyop or a manipulation, and relentlessly making it a continuous focus, again, even doing so objectively and stressing caution and skepticism is still, in a way, falling into their trap by making this story the focus. By disregarding all the other important and incredibly consequential news in favor of the crowd favorite. Even doing so objectively is to some degree what they want. And that's something we have to bear in mind moving forward. And I make an effort to cover anything I feel is relevant to everybody watching this show. But sometimes we have to let our gut guide us and realize that we can't just fall down the trap of what everybody's talking about. We have to be skeptical of everything we're looking at, even things that align with what we know is true. What we can prove is true, just because we want it to be true. Very, very dangerous path to go down. Now, I want to begin with the first story that in a way relates to some of this stuff going on right now, and this is a very interesting story that was first actually brought to my attention by a video done by Random Rants of Ryan, which he does fantastic work if you haven't checked out his YouTube channel as well. Also stresses skepticism and is very, very open-minded about everything he looks at. Now, this is a pretty interesting story that I wasn't even aware of until I saw this on his channel. And the story actually that I traced it back to is coming from MSN.com, as well as a Facebook group that's reporting on this from a Canada-based abuse group. And the article is entitled, I think it's Ottawa Animator, which is Canada, sent to prison on child porn charges. Very, very interesting story here, because this is facts. This is a real story. This person is going to jail. I'm actually surprised that I didn't see it beforehand. I would imagine someone like the Dick and Littlest Pet Shop, according to IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. You know, this isn't some major embedded elite. I mean, maybe, who knows? So if you're a law-abiding U.S. citizen, a team of armed undercover U.S. Marshals could now be following your next flight, taking minute-by-minute notes whether or not you engage in such threatening behavior as sleeping on a plane, using a phone, going to the bathroom, or possibly talking to other passengers.
And you know that false accusations
the secret program is called Move Forward. And these are the kind of things they don't want us paying attention to. As other things are happening around us and we're getting distracted by other things, these things move forward that have real-world, constant consequences for the rest of our lives that can really...
Which
I mean,
is all
you
about
could argue right now that we're going to come out actually after we've seen the kind of opposite response to people like North Korea and other places in the past where there's no agreement to meet unless they bend the knee before they even come to the table. So it's interesting to see this play here. It seems that U.S. policy is weakening to kind of the resistance from the rest of the world in regard to Iran and then pulling out of the nuclear deal. Maybe Trump realizes he was manipulated over the information there. We don't know, but it's interesting to see this. He said, quote, "I would certainly meet with Iran if they wanted to meet. I don't know if they're ready yet." So interesting development. It kind of does seem like a difference of policy when you hear first what the media is reporting, which shouldn't shock us at all, as they basically report whatever progresses their agenda. Clearly they all want war in general, war with Iran, war with North Korea, war with Syria. But then we also see the difference in the words coming from John Bolton's mouth, Rudy Giuliani's mouth, Mike Pompeo's mouth, and then from the president's mouth. So interesting to see how this plays out. Ultimately, the takeaway is we know that generally the real rulers of this country, the real oligarchy, absolutely wants war with Iran, or at the very least, a regime change to install the MEK. Very clearly. If you want more information on that, check out some of my previous shows. I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes. I always forget when I'm doing the live ones. Nonetheless, it's an interesting dynamic here to see how this is playing out. And again, like I said, ABC is reporting this as it's already been confirmed, that they are planning to attack nuclear capabilities of Iran. It's done. So, very weird to see this back and forth. But we'll keep on this and let you know how it develops. Moving on to the next story, coming from the globalresearch.ca, entitled, "The United States is the only remaining colonial power." Perfect transition from the story we were just talking about. But this is specifically in regard to South America. This is by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Now, he does write some pretty interesting things on kind of all over the map sometimes, but this I found very, very relevant. And I've been talking about Venezuela, Nicaragua, in Ecuador, specifically in regard to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And the way this is written is very, very profound, and I wanted to include a couple of notes from this specifically. So the United States government has never allowed independent governments in Latin America. Every time people elect a government that represents them, instead of U.S. economic interests, Washington overthrows the elected government. Marine General Smedley Butler told us this, as many others have, in fact, as actually recently just did a show about. There's no doubt about it. This is the way this works. Currently, Washington is trying to overthrow the governments of Venezuela and Nicaragua, and has in fact bought off Ecuadorian government with oil purchases and the usual personal bribes. Evo Morales' government in Bolivia is also targeted by Washington. The Obama regime succeeded in removing the reform governments of Honduras, Argentina, and Brazil. And it's interesting how so many people don't know these things, as the United States is essentially colonializing South America, as well as many other places around the world. Reform governments in Latin America, except for Castillo's Cuba, always leave themselves set up to be overthrown. They foolishly or impotently permit Washington's agents, such as the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and various other so-called NGOs, whose purpose is to maintain Washington's control and overthrow every government that escapes control, to organize and fund opposition groups and media that work hand-in-hand with Washington to reinstall a Washington-compliant government. James Corbett did an excellent show about this, understanding...
So, anyhow, that's what the main game plan is to insurrect and first take down the proxies of Iran. And, of course, especially with that last article there, that, America claiming to be the last colonial power. That means that they're starting to finally break free of the noose. And that will end on here. In the next video, I'll get some scriptures, as I'm using a different camera here, so I don't have that quite up. And Brakata and Shalom. Hope that these videos have been edifying as we move closer to the war, which will result in America being destroyed in 1 hour, as well as the rest of the wicked. Shalom.